Okay, good morning. Please take your seats. I am going to start the proceedings of this morning. As promised, we have left off on Monday afternoon with the agenda item AC33 Doc 8 on the role of CITES in reducing risk of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international wildlife trade. I will ask the Secretariat and nomenclature specialist who has been chairing the intercession working group to repeat their presentation of the document, and then I will come. You can't hear me? Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah, maybe they can just up the volume on the system. Is it better now? Can you hear? You might.
The interpreters can certainly hear.
Okay, I'm going to start again. Good morning. We have left off on Monday on agenda item 8 on the role of CITES in reducing risk of future zoonotic disease. And I will, can you hear me now? You may have to look at they have reduced the volume to 0 on many, I think, as a default, so you may have to adjust the volume to hear. Because I have several people who can hear me, so it must be something. Okay, good, very good. Okay. But before we reopen that agenda item, I will also say that I plan to look at the summary 2 at the beginning of the afternoon. So after lunch, I will open the summary record document 2. And I will also look at the first 2 COM documents that are already up this morning. So please be prepared to look at SUM 2 and the 2 COM documents that are already available this morning. So I will start with them in the afternoon. So with this, I'm going back to agenda item 8, and I would ask the Secretariat and the nomenclature specialist who has been the chair of the intercession working group to again introduce that document shortly. So thank you very much. Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. This document was prepared by the Secretariat and the co-chairs of the intercessional working group on the role of CITES in reducing risk of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international wildlife trade. At the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee, the committee considered document PC26, Doc 10, AC32, Doc 10, prepared by the Secretariat that contained information relating to the implementation of decisions 19.15 to 19.19, and in the present document, the Secretariat is providing an update. The Memorandum of Understanding between the CITES Secretariat and the World Organization for Animal Health was finalized after SC77 and signed by the CITES Secretariat and WOAH on 1 March 2024. WOAH released the guidelines for addressing disease risks in wildlife trade in May 2024. The guidelines enable key actors in wildlife trade to identify and select pragmatic, flexible, practical, adaptable, and relevant risk management strategies based on identified disease risks and available capacity, and to ensure the effective and sustainable implementation. And the Secretariat would like to draw parties' attention to these guidelines. The Secretariat provides an update on collaboration with the Convention on Migratory Species, focused on key outcomes of the 14th meeting of the Conference of Parties to CMS relevant to this item, the discussions at the 26th meeting of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological advice of the CBD relating to a draft global action plan on biodiversity and health, and information provided by UNEP that is contained in Annex 1 to the document. Chair, I will hand over to the co-chair of the Intersessional Working Group to present the report of the working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. So, Nomenclature Specialist, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretariat. At our 32nd meeting last year, the Animals Committee established an intersessional working group to review the report of the Secretariat to that meeting. This intersessional working group was chaired by Mr. Diezmos, the alternate member for Asia, and myself. The membership is presented in paragraph 12 of the present document, AC 33.8, and the working group worked through email. The working group members proposed a number of effective and practical solutions to reduce the risk of pathogen spillover in wildlife trade and in supply chains. And these solutions, proposed solutions, are summarized in paragraph 14, and they are provided in full in the annex to the document. The members also highlighted a number of opportunities for practical collaboration under the direction of existing resolutions, decisions, and agreements. And these are summarized in paragraph 15 and also provided fully in the annex. We invite the committee to share these suggestions and recommendations with the Standing Committee through its intersessional working group on the subject, and consider that decision 19.16 will then have been implemented and may be deleted at COP20. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Intersessional Working Group. So basically, we are asked to note the Memorandum of Understanding, the update in relation to Decision 1915 on collaboration with CMS, the update by the UNEP program on relevant work carried out under the quadripartite, and to agree to share the work of the working group in paragraphs 14 and 15 with the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group, and to agree that the decision 1916 has been implemented. So with this, I open the floor for any comments. And I recall we had Africa asking for the consideration of a resolution on Monday. I think it would be good if you could quickly repeat your intervention so that we are at the same state as we were on Monday when we left. So Africa, are you ready to repeat your request?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. On Monday, we congratulated CITES on all of the work done, and we welcomed the cooperation with other organizations, as well as the protocol with WOAH and collaboration with CMS. We also welcomed the update on UNEP. We also, with reference to paragraph 14, said that this should be shared with the Standing Committee. We felt that this should be taken a little bit further and have this a part and parcel of CITES activities in order to reduce the risk of zoonotic disease emergence and work with other international partners. We felt that we should draft a global resolution on reducing risk of future zoonotic disease associated with international trade. We thought there should be a resolution on just One Health. Thank you, sir.
Africa, for this, so I open now the floor for comments to members of the committee first. In indicating what I mentioned on Monday as well, that in view of the workload we already have, we have to be cautious to put more work onto the Secretariat, who has very limited resources, to try to ask them to propose a resolution or whatever additional work on this matter. So I open the floor. I see Europe, you have asked for the floor. Oh. I think it's North America who has asked for the floor. Your seat is probably meant to be Europe, but I will know in the future. So,
Sorry.
North America, you have the floor.
Okay, I was just checking with this. We had a response to some revision of the text. Is that appropriate now?
To which text?
There had been some suggestions made for change, comments by Europe, and we have a revision to that text.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We wanted to update our suggested revision to the text in paragraph 15B to be responsive to the comments by Europe made in the last session. In paragraph 15B, where it says, including the review of scientific authority of CITES permit application, we wish to replace this text to say, including, then strike through the review, and then add the following text. The management authority seeks advice from, and then it continues the scientific authority, and then add, and other relevant authorities on the review. And then it continues on of CITES permit applications. I can repeat that if you need.
Once more, please.
Sure. Including, strike through the review of, add, the management authority seeking advice from, then continue the scientific authority, then add again, and other relevant authorities on the review, and then continue of CITES permit application.
Okay, I got that. Any other member asking for the floor? Okay, taking that, as always, silence is consent with the rest of the recommendations. I see Israel has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Israel welcomes this report by the Animals Committee and by the Intersessional Working Group on Zoonotic Diseases, which we were part of. I'm also co-chair of the Standing Committee Working Group on Zoonotic Diseases, and we've been waiting, of course, for the Animal Committee's work so that we can continue our work in the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on this issue. First of all, we'll say that we agree with the change proposed by North America to paragraph 15B. One of the most important things I think that came out of this discussion in the Animals Committee was the working group was a very strong feeling that this is within the mandate of CITES to deal with this. There was some discussion as to whether CITES should even be dealing with wildlife trade as a source of risk for zoonotic diseases, and this certainly the scientific committee of CITES has found this to be an issue of concern. We would just like to stress the initiatives that have come out here in terms of getting the countries to have a One Health approach resolution as was proposed by the delegate from Africa. This is certainly something the the Standing Committee could deal with and our working group, and we, not here at Animals Committee, but at the Standing Committee Working Group, we hope to be able to move this forward there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So this topic is already taken up then by you, but I think if the Animals Committee wants to suggest that also to the Standing Committee, it of course can do that. So I see Senegal has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat and the Intersessional Working Group. We would also like to say that we support the statement by the delegate for Africa. I would also like to stress that we need data with respect to these issues. We need to know more about animal disease, particularly zoonotic disease. Their states, therefore, should work very hard in concerted fashion, thinking about just one health, and to ensure that they can do something to reduce the risk of zoonotic disease associated with international wildlife trade. CITES does indeed have a role to play here, particularly when it comes to the whole question of those species that are subject to international trade. This in order to reduce the risk of this disease. Thank you.
Well, I see Malaysia. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Malaysia would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing document AC33, document 8. Malaysia strongly supports the recommendation in paragraph 17, which adopt the draft proposal by the Intersectional Working Group for consideration by the Animal Committee, as stated in paragraph 15A, as encouragement for parties to incorporate zoonotic mitigation measures into national law to regulate wildlife captive breed center, including domestic market or home-based pet industry, to have at least minimum standard to secure biodiversity, environmental integrity, food security, and human health. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaysia. I see the Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'd just like to make a comment, is that from the Netherlands and actually the EU, that veterinary measures are always above those from CITES. So if there are any necessary veterinary measures to be taken, the permitting process won't even start. So that would then not be necessary to have veterinary measures in the CITES permitting. Thank you.
Thank you, the Netherlands. I see Central, South America and the Caribbean. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I have been looking at in relation to this issue is I don't see where in the document it would be a prerequisite for before the issuing of a CITES certificate for the export of live wild fauna, whether it is necessary for the national or the parties' animal health authorities to issue a certificate before consideration of a CITES certificate could be done. So basically what I am recommending is that at the national level, at the very low ground level, it could be required for these national animal health authorities to kind of issue a certificate, and to some extent would be guaranteeing the health of the animals before they're exported with a CITES certificate. Thank you.
Thank you, Central, South America and the Caribbean. I mean, that is what is often happening. I mean, whenever we, for instance, we import animals from third countries, then we request them to have a health certificate with them before we allow the import. So this is a procedure that usually happens, to my knowledge, at least. I see Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Canada will just make a couple of additional comments based on the discussion that we've had here. So firstly, as expressed by our colleague from North America, we do support the recommendations in paragraph 17. Regarding the final point, under 15D, talking about coordination of relevant competent authorities, I think that speaks to that relationship. We recognize that the veterinary measures for import are a national purview, and in Canada they're undertaken by another body, but having good collaboration and coordination between our management authority issuing CITES permits and our inspection authorities, veterinary authorities, is always wise and a good thing to remind ourselves to do. We really do congratulate the new guidelines that WOA has prepared, and we do think because they're relatively new, there could be some more work looking at those guidelines and then thinking about some of the recommendations that we have in 14 and how we can use those guidelines to try to address some of those recommendations. And so I do think that there is some further consideration that the Standing Committee Working Group will be well placed to undertake, taking on board the recommendations that are in the document from the Animals Committee. But because I do think that there is further conversations to have about sort of finding the right space and the right way to engage in this issue, from a Canadian perspective, I'm not in a position right now to suggest that we encourage a resolution on this matter. I think there is still quite a bit more conversation to have, absorbing these recommendations as well as having the discussion in the Standing Committee Working Group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, for this. And I do think also that we should wait for the Standing Committee to review all this and see if they are in a position to propose a resolution based on their discussions. What they will certainly do, as I've heard from Israel, who is the co-chair of this Standing Committee Working Group. So I'm hesitant to propose now already a resolution coming, as a suggestion for a resolution coming out of the Animals Committee. But I think that will certainly be taken up by the Standing Committee Working Group on this matter. So do I see anybody else asking for the floor? I see WCS. WCS, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And we note that we're a member of both the Animals Committee and the Standing Committee Working Group. This is a matter of great urgency, and there are urgent actions that are critical for governments to take, both through CITES internationally and, of course, at the national level. COVID is still with us. Avian influenza is with us. We agree to forward the recommendations to the Standing Committee. We'd like to call your attention with disappointment to the WHO negotiations, which did not resolve. And actually, WHO negotiators from all your governments met yesterday and the day before. And we urge CITES authorities to engage with their governments, because we hear some good interventions from CITES authorities that sometimes their negotiators at the WHO are not always on the same page. I'm not going to name countries. We appreciate the decisions of CMS and appreciate the CITES Secretariat calling those to your attention, and we urge the Animals Committee and possibly the chair or members to engage with the CMS Scientific Council, which is dealing with these issues both domestically and internationally, and there's an important role for CITES. We also appreciate the Secretariat calling attention to the new WOA guidelines for addressing disease risks in wildlife trade, which were issued just in May. They're excellent. And as the Animals Committee is looking at what to consider, we urge starting with the WOA guidelines, because there's excellent information there, and we urge parties to take a look at those guidelines. We also urge parties, you are all CITES parties other than one, committed to submitting your NBSAPs under CBD, including Target 5, which has to do with reducing the risk of pathogen spillover. And we urge parties to include their CITES implementation in their NBSAPs that are due basically next month. And finally, we do support the development of a CITES One Health resolution. Whether it comes from the Standing Committee or individual parties, we are committed to assist parties if they request that assistance in developing a draft resolution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCS. I see Born Free Foundation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of a number of organisations. The details have been provided to the Secretariat. It's certainly our view that CITES has a vital role to play in reducing the risk of pathogen emergence from wildlife trade. We therefore welcome the report. We also agree with the representatives of the Africa region, Israel, Senegal and Wildlife Conservation Society, and urge the committee to recommend the development of a resolution to the Standing Committee Working Group on this issue in order to embed appropriate actions into CITES processes and taking into account the draft resolution on One Health and CITES proposed by a number of parties at COP19 in Doc 23.2 Annex 1, the need to continue and enhance collaboration with other key organisations that have a role in this issue, including WOA, CMS, CBD and the WHO, the Convention requirements to minimise the risk to living specimens of injury, damage to health or cruel treatment, and the need to enable timely transfer of diagnostic samples to accredited laboratories. The committee should also consider recommending further review and revision of CITES processes and guidance on transport of live animals with a view to reducing the risk of zoonotic pathogen emergence, as was recommended by the working group. And finally, while decision 19.16 may technically have been fulfilled, an ongoing role for the Animals Committee in informing and advising parties on reducing zoonotic risks and in promoting coordination between CITES authorities and other relevant agencies should be recognised in the recommendations emerging from this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bornfree. And finally, I have CMS.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Let me first recognize the great cooperation between CITES and CMS, and we are looking to develop it further after the Scientific Council we will be holding in September, which will discuss the next steps to take in this area. We support the recommendations which accompany this document, and with respect to small b, I would like to suggest that in paragraph 14b, CMS is added to the list of organizations whose materials could be developed when developing the guidelines. I would like to draw your attention to the statement on avian influenza developed by the joint task force between CMS and FAO on that issue, or the report on wildlife health and migratory species, which has been presented to our last COP in February in Samarkand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CMS. And as last I take traffic, then I will wrap up. So traffic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Traffic supports the outputs of the intersessional working group as detailed in paragraphs 14 to 16 of AC33 Doc 8, summarised in recommendation 17B for consideration by the Animals Committee. Additionally, Traffic was invited to join the World Organization for Animal Health to highlight the WOA guidelines on addressing risks in wildlife trade earlier this year. Traffic echoes the comments made by Canada, and based on the experience of working with WOA, can confirm the guidelines' utility in framing multi-sectorial engagement on real-time trade regimes involving priority wild animal taxa in international trade. Traffic thus will be pleased to work with WOA, the CITES Secretariat and others to conduct similar efforts with other CITES parties upon request. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. So, having heard not unanimous support for recommending the development of a resolution, and mainly also not having heard support for that from the members of the Animals Committee, I don't think I will take up this matter. But I think the Animals Committee notes the MOU between CITES Secretariat and WA signed on the 1st March 2024, and the guidelines for addressing disease risk in wildlife trade released by WA in May 2024. Also notes the update relating to the implementation of paragraph C of Decision 1915 on collaboration with the Convention of Migratory Species, and the update provided by the United Nations Environment Programme on relevant work carried out under the quadripartite collaboration for One Health and other relevant initiatives. It also agrees to share to propose effective and practical solution for reducing pathogen spillover risk in wildlife supply chains and opportunities for practical collaboration as contained in paragraphs 14 and 15 as amended by Germany, the United States and CMS with the Standing Committee through its intercession working group, and agrees that Decision 1916 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. So I don't see any opposition from the members, so that's the decision on that matter. So now we move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 10, the joint CITES-CMS African Carnivores Initiative, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. During AC32, the Secretariat provided an oral update on the ACI, noting that the second meeting of the range states of the joint CITES-CMS African Carnivore Initiative took place from 1 to 4 May 2023 in Entebbe, Uganda, and that the outcomes agreed by the ACI range states were shared through an information document. The Secretariat published the outcomes again as an information document for this meeting as AC33 Inf 3. The ACI range states prioritized result areas in the ACI program of work on a regional basis, taking into consideration the conservation importance of the result area. 8 result areas had been rated as high conservation importance by all range states. The Secretariat indicated that out of the different activities identified by the range states, the development of trade resource kits for lions and leopards based on the trade resource kit for cheetahs, and the development of an African lion inventory and an African lion database may be relevant to the mandate of CITES and more specifically of the Animals Committee. The Secretariat proposes new draft decisions to support these priority activities. Looking towards the future, the Secretariat proposes to include the species covered by the ACI. It's Acinonyx jubatus, Panthera leo, and Panthera pardus in paragraph 1b of Resolution Conf 13.3 on cooperation and synergy with the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, as part of its ongoing work with the Convention on Migratory Species. The Secretariat furthermore notes that there may be a need to revise and update the program of work for the ACI that will not be fully implemented by 2025 in order to reflect new decisions adopted by CMS and CITES. It should be noted that the CMS COP 14 also adopted decisions relating to the ACI to provide for the review and extension of the program of work. And the Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 10 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments on the document and the recommendations to the members of the Animals Committee. Observer parties. And observer organizations. I see CMS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. As pointed out by the CITES Secretariat in document AC33, document 10, the range states of the African Carnivores Initiative prioritized at their second meeting hosted by the government of Uganda in May 23, the development of an African lion inventory and an African lion database, which are relevant to this committee. In that regard, the CMS Secretariat would like to inform the committee that a first meeting of the working group on the African lion database, which was established by the second range state meeting, took place on 25th of June 2024. At this meeting, range states agreed that the African lion database, as developed by IUCN, is a good database capturing essential data to use and endorse within the African Carnivores Initiative. It also agreed that following an explanation of the African lion database process, further discussions are needed among range states on how the database is managed and how range states can be involved in its governance and can take ownership of it, which should be the focus of the next working group meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, CMS, for this additional information, which is certainly noted. I see Born Free Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'm making this intervention on behalf of a number of organisations, and I'll provide the list to the Secretariat. We urge the committee to adopt the recommendations in paragraph 10 of the document. Given that elements of the current programme of work will not be fulfilled by 2025, we also urge the committee to instruct the Secretariat to seek the resources necessary to ensure the revised ACI programme of work outlined in draft decision 19.24 Rev COP 20 in Annex 2 of the document can be completed within the specified timeframes. We also urge the Secretariat to consult relevant taxon and enforcement experts in the fulfilment of draft decision 20BB on the development of trade resources materials for African lion and leopard. Thank you.
Thank you, Born Free Foundation. So seeing no more interventions, the conclusions are that the Animals Committee agrees to submit the draft amendments to Resolution Conf 13.3 on cooperation and synergy with the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, CMS, in paragraph 7 of document AC33 Doc 10 for consideration by the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee for onward submission to the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting. B, agrees to submit the draft decision contained in Annex 2 to document AC33 Doc 10 for consideration by the 78th meeting of Standing Committee for onward submission to the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting, and agrees to submit the draft decisions contained in Annex 3 to document AC33 Doc 10 for consideration by the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting. Okay, that's the conclusion on agenda item 10. So with this, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 34, outcomes of the CITES Big Cats Task Force consultation on a resolution on big cats. Sorry. I jumped ahead. I want to finish early, I think. So we're not going there yet. First, we have agenda item 36 on African lions. But I also give the floor to the Secretary to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. This document was prepared by the Secretariat and provides an update on the implementation of decisions 19.205 to 19.210 on African lions, Panthera Leo. The Secretariat would like to highlight a few updates contained in the document. The Secretariat initiated the comparative study on African lion population trends and conservation and management practices called for in paragraph B of decision 19.205 in partnership with the University of Oxford, and the Secretariat is grateful for the financial support provided by Switzerland. The Secretariat consulted the range states on the proposed approach for the study, sources of information to be used, key research questions, criteria to identify the countries for the comparative assessment of population trends and conservation and management practices, and invited African lion range states to actively participate in the study. A number of range states have expressed their interest in participating in the study, and further consultation and discussions will take place as part of the next steps. Based on the timeline for the study, the report will be available for consideration by the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee and the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. The Secretariat developed draft guidance on the making of non-detriment findings for African lions in collaboration with the IUCN and in close consultation with range states. The Secretariat invites African lion range states to test the general CITES NDF guidance and the guidance for NDF findings for African lions under CITES that's attached in Annex 3 to the document, and to provide feedback to the Secretariat on their experiences. The Animals Committee will be invited to consider the information in document AC33, Doc 36, and the draft decisions contained in Annex 2 to the document for consideration by the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting and onward submission to COP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments from members of the committee. Observer parties. and observer organizations. Born Free Foundation, you have the floor.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence this morning. I'm making this intervention again on behalf of a number of NGOs, and I'll provide the list to the Secretariat. We urge the committee to adopt the recommendations contained in paragraph 17 of the document with the following amendments. Decision 19.205D should be retained to ensure the joint CITES-CMS web portal on African lions is maintained and regularly updated, and that parties are informed of relevant updates through the Secretariat's regular reports to CITES meetings. With regard to draft decision 19.206 Rev Cop 20, paragraph A should also include relevant updates brought to the committee's attention by range states. And finally, we urge the committee to consider recommending the development of a resolution on African lions for consideration and adoption at COP 20 to ensure continuity of work on this species. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Born Free. I see Conservation Force. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And congratulations to the CITES Secretariat and the range states for having put together this important document. We do not agree of having a resolution on lions, clearly, but we would like to comment on the comparative study. If needed, Chair, we have a wealth of information on hunting practices on this species. The offtake is negligible, is biologically insignificant, but if needed, we have a wealth of information that can be made available for this study. Thank you.
Thank you, Conservation Force. Thank you, Conservation Force. I think in the process that is foreseen at the moment, it's mainly with range states, but if additional information will be needed, then of course there will be a more open consultation process where you would be able to provide this information. So I think with this we can close that item by concluding that the Animals Committee agrees to submit the draft decisions contained in Annex 2 to document AC 33.36 for consideration by the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting and onward submission to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So now we can move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 34, outcomes of the CITES Big Cat Task Force consultation on a resolution on big cats. And I give the floor to the Secretary to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. Document 34 has been prepared by the Secretariat in accordance with the Decision 1992, the Secretariat organized the CITES Big Cat Task Force meeting in Uganda in April 2023. The meeting addressed enforcement and implementation issues related to illegal trade in big cats. The outcome document of the meeting was presented at the SC 77. One element outlined in the outcome document of the task force meeting required further consideration by the Standing Committee. Paragraph 1.1 in that document invited the Secretariat to consider the merits of a resolution on illegal trade in big cats, or to revise the existing Resolution Conf 12.5 Rev Cop 19 on the conservation of and trade in tigers and other Appendix-I big cat species, with the aim to strengthen effective implementation and enforcement of the Convention with regard to the illegal trade in all big cat species. The Secretariat sought guidance from the Standing Committee regarding this proposal, and the committee requested the Secretariat to issue a notification to the parties to invite perspective of the matter, to prepare an analysis of the merits and drawbacks of developing a resolution on all big cats, and in consultation with the Animals Committee, submit its conclusions and recommendations to SC 78. The Secretariat issued notification to the parties number 2023/130 to gather perspectives on this proposal. The present document summarizes the responses received from Brazil, the European Union and its member states, the United Kingdom, and from the Wildlife Conservation Society. It also outlines the potential merits and drawbacks, and mentioning ongoing initiatives related to big cats. In the annex to the document, it provides a summary of current resolutions and decisions on big cat species. The Secretariat notes that only a limited number of responses were received in response to the notification, with a lack of responses from range states. Nevertheless, the responses show that perspectives on the merits of a resolution of all big cats are divided. The potential benefits of such a resolution include strengthening regional and international collaboration, facilitating coordinated actions and reducing duplications, increasing commitment to tackle illegal trade, and identifying shifts in demand and drivers of illegal trade in big cats. The responses also highlight several drawbacks. The issues facing different big cat species and their trade might be too diverse to address in one single resolution. Such a resolution could become lengthy and difficult to implement, and revising the resolution might be complex or of little conservation benefit, and there could be disagreement on which species should be included. The recommendation prepared for consideration by the committee is presented in paragraph 19 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now open the floor for comments from members. I see Central South America and the Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for preparing this document, AC 33.34, on the outcomes of the CITES Big Cats Task Force with a consultation on the resolution on big cats. On this document, we would like to highlight what Brazil already mentioned at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee. In response to the notification 2023-130, we recalled that on behalf of the Central, South America and Caribbean region, that the potential resolution be postponed until the next meeting of the Standing Committee, and it was proposed to exclude the Jaguar, Panthera, onca, and to look at the work of a draft resolution which is specifically dedicated to jaguars. This document recommends that the Animals Committee be invited to examine the aspects linked to the conservation and management mentioned in the response to the notification to the parties 2023-130 and the preliminary outcomes set out in the document, as well as the potential advantages and drawbacks of a resolution on big cats or the potential amendment of Resolution 12.5 Rev COP 19. So with this, we would like to repeat that our region is not in agreement with the inclusion of the Jaguar, Panthera, onca in a resolution on big cats. Thank you.
Thank you, Central South America and the Caribbean. I open the floor for further comments from members. Observer parties. I see Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil would like to echo the intervention made by the representative of the Central, South America, and the Caribbean region. We consider it essential to develop robust measures and guidelines to enhance conservation efforts and strengthen enforcement actions against both illegal trade and international trafficking of big cats. However, big cat species encounter varying levels of impacts and threats, along with a historical relationship of commercial use and consumption, which adds to the complexity of the subject. In this context, while the proposal to include all big cats in a new resolution, or as a revision of Resolution Conf 12.5, Rev Cop 19, may streamline procedural efforts, it risks weakening target actions for species in different regions that face unique conditions, threats, impacts, and even trade demands. Finally, we would like to recall the ongoing process within the Intersessional Working Group on Jaguars, Panthera onca, and the discussions on a possible new resolution specifically addressing this species. Therefore, we do not support the inclusion of jaguars in any potential comprehensive resolution on big cats. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I see India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India notes the document AC 33-34 and appreciates the work of the Secretariat. With successful conservation trajectory for tigers, Asiatic lions, snow leopards, leopards in India, we have also initiated the first of its kind, wild-to-wild continental translocation of cheetah for reintroduction program with kind support of Government of Namibia and South Africa. Honorable Prime Minister of India had launched an International Big Cat Alliance, the IPCA, for the conservation of 7 big cats, namely tiger, lion, leopard, snow leopard, cheetah, jaguar, and puma. The alliance aims to reach out to all range countries of these 7 big cat species for strengthening global cooperation and efforts to conserve these species in the wild. We would like to invite big cat range countries, interested non-range countries, as well as the intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations for considering partnering the alliance. India also wished to align with the suggestion for a possible revision of Resolution 12.5, Rev Cop 19, to be applicable to all big cat species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. I don't see any other party asking for the floor, so I open the floor for observer organizations. I see the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK acknowledges the value of the Big Cat Task Force and would want the outcomes of the first meeting published formally in an easily accessible and searchable place. Res Conf 12.5, Rev Cop 19 could be an appropriate place for this, and the UK has supported further consideration of this. However, noting various challenges that the threats facing big cats vary according to species and region, that range states have requested to exclude jaguar from such a resolution, and noting concerns about both the dilution of the intent of Res Conf 12.5, and then it could become overlong, unwieldy, and less easy to navigate and implement. Therefore, the UK does not consider revision of Res Conf 12.5 to be applicable to all big cat species as a way forward, although we are open to ongoing discussions regarding this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. Now, I don't see any other party, so I see EIA UK.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of a number of organizations, the names of which have been supplied to the Secretariat. We think it is important that the outcomes of the CITES Big Cats Task Force inform implementation of the Convention for Big Cats by parties. However, we oppose the development of a common resolution for all big cats or a revision of Res Conf 12.5 to include all big cats at this stage. While there may be some common issues affecting big cats, such as convergence and substitution of parts in trade, there are also significant differences in the threats facing different species and differences in management regimes, as well as a very large number of range states across multiple continents. The big cats are listed in different appendices, meaning that a common resolution would involve different recommendations for different species. The few benefits of such a resolution are outweighed by the likelihood of its eventual complexity and length and the time and effort that would go into producing it. We would further recommend that the CITES Big Cats Task Force be reconvened on an appropriately regular basis to continue the good work from the inaugural meeting, reviewing and addressing cross-species issues and solutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EIA UK. I see Conservation Force. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And just first of all, a comment on the India initiative. We welcome that initiative, and we will make contact with the Indian authorities on how we could assist and be part of that. And second, a comment, Chair, on the Latin America desire to have something, to exclude Jaguar from this work and to have something specific on Jaguar. This could be valid for any species. We have also to recognize that for most of the species, retaliatory killing is the main threat, and this is outside the pursuit of this convention. This is something that should be much more importantly taken note at the bilateral level, and how we can assist parties in this, but this is out of pursuit of this convention. So I would like to express again the interest for that Indian initiative, which is something that being done at the national level could be extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Conservation Force. I don't see anybody else asking for the floor, so I will try to wrap up in a minute. Okay, so having heard all the interventions, the conclusion of the Animals Committee could be the Animals Committee invites the Secretariat to take into consideration the comments made during the discussion in the preparation of the report to Standing Committee 78, noting that there was no support for the creation of a resolution on all big cats or the possible revision of Resolution Conf 12.5 Rev Cop 19. On the second point, I'm not really sure, to be honest, because I did hear some support but I would have to be sure to if there was really no support for the possible revision of Resolution Conf 12.5 to be applicable to all big cats, but the sentiment was that there was not really support for that. I see the Netherlands, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not involved in this at all, but reading the document, I see that the EU and its member states did actually support that in their response. Thank you.
Okay, so I would change that to that there was no support for the creation of a resolution on all big cats and limited support for the revision of Resolution Conf 12.5. Okay? Okay, so with this we can close that agenda item, and the next one on the list is document 18, guidance of non-detriment findings for trade in leopard hunting trophies. Document 18, it's been prepared by the Secretariat, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. The document and its addendum were prepared by the Secretariat. The Secretariat did not initiate the process to develop further NDF guidance specifically for leopard hunting trophies, pending the finalization of the NDF guidance developed pursuant to decisions 19.132 to 19.134 and the development of NDF guidance for African lion. As indicated in the document, the Secretariat reached out to the parties with quotas for leopard hunting trophies established under Resolution Conf 10.14, Rev Cop 19, inviting the parties to indicate their preference in terms of support to be provided, taking into consideration decisions 18.166 and 18.169, Rev Cop 19, and the funding secured. The Secretariat appreciates the funding provided by Conservation Force and Dallas Safari Club International Foundation to support this work. Based on the responses received, the Secretariat arranged an online meeting that took place on 20 June 2024 and is reported on in the addendum to document AC 33, Doc 18. The Secretariat observed that parties with quotas for leopard hunting trophies established under Resolution Conf 10.14, Rev Cop 19, demonstrated in their respective submissions that the principles and guidance contained in the NDF modules are applied in the management of quotas, and a few examples are provided. The observations by parties are reflected in paragraph 6 of the addendum, while recommendations made by the parties participating in the online workshop are contained in paragraph 7 of the addendum. The Secretariat included its observations in paragraphs 8 to 10, including proposals relating to the decisions to be deleted or revised and a proposed new decision. The Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 11 of the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for any comments on that matter. I see Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Delegates may recall that Oceania expressed, I suppose, concern about some of the possible quota being set for leopards. Felt that they were too high. And so it's good to see in this paper that there has been considerable work done, and the fact that the NDF workshop is being used to help guide the setting of these annual quota. And so, I think good progress is being made. But just turning to draft decision 20AA, which calls for consolidation of existing information, I have no problem at all with that, except it doesn't seem to go anywhere. When in paragraph, so that's in paragraph 10 of the addendum, but in paragraph 7C of the addendum, it's calling for an in-person workshop to discuss the consolidated information. And so I believe that the decision 20AA needs some additional text referring to if funds are available, that an in-person workshop be held to consider the consolidated information that is sought through the existing text of 20AA. So just in addition to that text. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania, for this suggestion. I now open the floor to observer parties. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States appreciates the Secretariat's effort to organize the online meeting and the support of the donors, as well as the participation of range states with leopard quotas. However, the United States does not support the deletion of decisions 18.166 and 18.168 Rev Cop 19. We commend the leopard range states with leopard hunting quotas and the Secretariat for their dedication in developing NDF guidance for trade in leopard hunting trophies. However, the work required is of an ongoing nature to ensure that the best available and most up-to-date information is continually considered in making NDFs for leopard hunting trophies. This requires that parties continue to do the work outlined in decision 18.166, conduct regular surveys, adjust quotas as appropriate, and exchange information regarding the process for determining quotas. In addition, the United States does not agree that further NDF guidance is not needed. At the online workshop, the Secretariat presented information relating to the guidance on making NDFs developed in terms of decision 19.132 on non-detriment findings. While the application of modules 1, 2, and 4 appear to be helpful in the Secretariat's noted observations, the modules resulting from the NDF workshop are preliminary. We're referring to the guidance as Rev 1. Given that the CITES NDF guidance is now being used and reviewed in its present form, it by extension suggests that any additional NDF guidance for leopards based on the CITES NDF guidance should also be considered to be preliminary at this time. We support the revised text for decision 18.169, and we welcome any thoughts from others on this matter, and thank you.
Thank you, United States. I open the floor for other observer parties. I see Botswana. Botswana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us the floor. As this is our first time to comment, we wish to thank you and congratulate you for the manner in which you have been conducting the proceedings. We also wish to extend our best wishes for your retirement. I know we have been saying this all over and over again. We thank the Secretariat for this document, Mr. Chairman. We also thank our host, Switzerland, for the hospitality that has been extended to us. We thank the organization of the workshop that we participated in June, and the workshop provided a platform for exchange of ideas and information on leopard management and monitoring, as well as enhancing capacity to range states to develop the NDFs. In relation to the document under discussion, we would like to share that Botswana is already undertaking a national, or is in the middle of conducting a national leopard survey, which is coming to an end in the first quarter of 2025 in fulfillment of Decision 18.166. And the report will be shared with Animals Committee through CITES Secretariat. In addition, we have just submitted an approved leopard management plan to CITES as an information document published as AC 33 Info 22 on the CITES website. With regards to the recommendation, Mr. Chair, we agree with the deletion of Decision 18.166 and 18.168 revised the COP 2019. They are done. We also agree with the new draft text in paragraph 10 of the recommendations. I submit, Chair.
Thank you, Botswana. Any other observer party wishing to take the floor? I open the floor for observer organizations. I see Pro-Wildlife, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This intervention is made on several observer organizations whose names will be provided to the Secretariat. We support the comments made by the United States. We do not agree to delete the decisions related to leopard hunting trophies resulting from the online meeting of parties with hunting quotas for the species. Noting the unfavorable conservation status of many leopard populations and scientific concerns with current quotas, we are convinced that such guidance is urgently needed to assist parties in the making of non-detriment findings. There has been a long-standing agreement by the parties since COP 18 in 2019 to develop such guidance, and now that the funding has finally been secured, independent scientists should be commissioned to take the lead in developing it. From the report from the online meeting, we also understand that parties submitted leopard non-detriment findings and also on management of quotas, and we would urge to make this information available on the CITES non-detriment fighting database, along with the existing restrictions in leopard hunting and their monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Pro-Wildlife. At CWWF, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In brief, WWF would align itself with the comments of the United States, and we remain of the view of the concerns expressed by Oceania about the level of some of these quotas. Thank you, Chair.
I will give the floor to Ranching South Africa. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to align ourselves with the comments made by Botswana. The work has been done. I think it's essential that we allow range states that are doing the hard yards on the ground to make their own decisions about what progress they've achieved going forward for leopard conservation. We need to support the countries that are doing the work and give them the same credence to go forward and be proactive. Thank you.
Thank you. And a very short intervention by Conservation Force, please.
Thank you, Chair. As it was recognized by the Secretariat, Conservation Force provided funding together with Dallas Safari Club for the development of the guidance. After reading the report we learned that this guidance is not needed, and we welcome that because it is clearly stated in the report that the range countries has, first of all, already done NDF. So it's, and this was already discussed at COP19 in Panama. If they already done an NDF, why should they need a guidance? But after this report on the virtual meeting, it is clear that all the parties which have quotas have a robust monitoring system. They are doing surveys, they are doing management plans, and there are robust management measures in place. So we would like to align ourselves to the observations and to the recommendation of the addendum. And we would like also to have the guidance and the comments on the Secretariat on this, because we understand that this has been a throughout process where the range states have already complied and are regularly complying with all science and monitoring on this species. Thank you.
Thank you, Conservation Force. I see Europe, you have asked for the floor.
The use of guidance material depends on the willingness of the affected range states to use them. If the range states of leopard think they don't require any further guidance material and they are developed, they most likely will not use them. So I doubt that it makes sense to invest more efforts in a project which the affected range states don't really seem to welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. And I see Canada and then Senegal.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Canada was interested in hearing the views of the range state in order to formulate a view on this. We've read the addendum document a bit more thoroughly, and we did hear from Botswana. And so, similar to Europe, I think Canada would support the recommendations that are found in the addendum as written, based on the information that we've heard here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. And now finally, Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. Senegal is concerned at the poor conservation status of leopards. We also find the hunting trophy quota to be high. Those numbers do not seem to us to be in keeping with the conservation status of leopards, which is very poor. We support the United States, and we do think that the decisions should be maintained. They would allow us to keep a better grip on the level of these hunting trophies. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senegal. I will allow one final contribution by Tanzania, and then I will try to wrap up. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Tanzania is among leopard range states, which I think they have the highest quota for leopard hunting. And we have produced NDF to justify that such quota is not detrimental to the survival of the leopard. And Tanzania also leads in terms of the leopard population. And we are convinced and align ourselves with the comment raised by Botswana, the EU, and Canada that we don't need another set of guidance for making of non-detriment findings for the leopard. But rather, the range states agreed during the online meeting that what we need is more of the capacity building and support in order to produce the population data to continue to justify our management practices that are happening in leopard range states, as well as using the existing material in shaping our NDFs as appropriate. So we welcome the proposal by the Secretariat to delete the decisions that we are comfortable that they have been implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. I now will try to wrap up. I see that China has asked for the floor, but I decided that I think I've heard enough, and I will try to wrap up and make a proposal of a way forward. Thank you. Okay, I've listened carefully, and I mean this initiative was asking the parties with the quotas to make NDFs and to also discuss this matter amongst themselves. And in what I've heard from these range states, they have done it. And I do think with the new decisions as proposed in the document, we do have a process that if anything arises, it will come back to this committee, as the Secretariat will assure that any new information that is relevant to the Animals Committee is going to come back out of the ACI. So I do think that the concerns raised by the United States are taken care of with these new decisions. So I tend to propose to the Animals Committee to go along what the Secretariat has been proposing, and we will also take up the comments from Oceania to amend 20AA. I will read that out whenever I come to that part of my conclusions. So with this, I would conclude that the Animals Committee notes the observations and recommendations made by parties which have quotas for leopard hunting trophies established under Resolution Conf 1014 that participated in the online workshop, agree that decisions 18166 and 18168 RevCop 19 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and agree to submit the revision to the decision 18169 and the new draft decision proposed in paragraph 10 above in paragraph 10 of the addendum for consideration by the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. And this new decision would read, I will read the whole decision, it's quite a long sentence, so please bear with me. Yeah? Parties which have quotas for leopard hunting trophies established under Resolution Conf 1014, Rev COP 19, to consolidate existing information relating to the management and monitoring of leopard and hunting quotas that assist parties in the making of non-detriment findings for trade in leopard hunting trophies in compliance with Resolution Conf 1014. And now comes the new part, and to share these with leopard range states through the ACI. So to make sure that all this information comes into the ACI process, and within this process, anything that is of importance to the Animals Committee will be fed back through the Secretariat. So to make sure that we do have this continuous work being done. So that's my proposal. I see nodding from the members, so it's good. This is the conclusion of that item, and I would now move on to the next one. I see the United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We totally agree with your approach. Given that we would just have one minor suggestion to add to decision 18.169 at the end of the sentence of that, where it says, on the African Carnivore Initiative, we would like to add the following text, and make such guidance available on the CITES website for use by relevant parties. Basically, we've heard that these NDFs have been made, but they're not available on the CITES website, so adding that text would ensure that.
United States, so you would like to add to, in the addendum on page 4 to the 18169 Rev COP 20B. You want to add that? Okay. Can you read it out again, please?
Red light. At the end of that sentence, I would add this phrase, and make such guidance available on the CITES website for use by relevant parties. Thank you.
So, and make such guidance available on the CITES website for the use by relevant parties. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think this is a good addition. So I don't see anybody. I see South Africa. South Africa have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, we just could not follow. Can the sentence be read completely so we're able to follow? Thank you.
Yes, South Africa. So we would have an amendment to 18.619, but
if it
Yes, reading it again, I'm not sure if this really is necessary, because basically what we have now is that the Secretariat shall subject to extraordinary resources and as part of the ACI support range states upon request to consolidate existing information relating to the management and monitoring of leopard and hunting trophies, that assist parties in the making on NDFs for trade in leopard hunting trophies in compliance with Resolution Conf 10/14, facilitate the sharing of information with the relevant parties and bring any aspects around to the mandate of the Animals Committee to its attention. So it's not really about guidance, it's information sharing, and I do think that this already happens under that revised decision. So I don't think that it really adds on, unless, yes, can you agree, United States?
We were trying to get to the point, and I didn't phrase it perhaps correctly, that the information would be somehow, it's being shared, but where is it being posted that it would be available to look at? But I'm happy to go with what the chair suggests.
I understand what the United States would like to have all this information available on the CITES website, but this is information sharing between the parties concerned to help them among themselves to do that work. And if there is something of interest to the Animals Committee, the Secretariat will be providing that information. So I think the way it is written, it serves the purpose quite well. Okay. Okay. So with this, I think we can, I see Eugenia has asked the floor. Eugenia, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. I'd still quite like somewhere in either paragraph B here or in the new 20AA some reference to the desire of having an in-person workshop. And if as that was requested, or one of the recommendations 7C above, to have an in-person workshop to look at the consolidated information, that could be potentially covered by the word facilitate the sharing of information. But given the range of views we've heard, having an in-person workshop that isn't just entirely restricted to the parties that are setting quota, have a wider workshop where other parties could also assist, I think would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. I think we can take note, because include something, because I think everything that is going to happen under 18169 is going to be subject to external resources anyway. So in BB, we could include under facilitate the sharing of information, preferably through an in-person workshop with relevant parties. Or share the information with the relevant parties, preferably through an in-person workshop, and bring any aspects and so on. Would that be in line with what you're asking?
Yes. So that would allow experts from beyond those relevant range states to also be involved in that workshop with whatever expertise they can bring to doing NDFs, etc.
Okay, so this would then, I will read it again, 18169, letter B, where it says, facilitate the sharing of information with the relevant parties, preferably through an in-person workshop, and bring any aspects relevant to the mandate of the Animals Committee to its attention. Okay, so this means that the recommendations I read out will be changed in letter C. Agree to submit the revisions of Decision 169 RevCop 19 as amended by Oceania and the new draft decision proposed in paragraph 10, also as amended by Oceania for consideration by the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Okay. Okay, I think with this we have concluded that agenda item, and I would now go on to the next agenda item, which is, let me see, 38, leopards. Again, leopards, I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. This document was prepared by the Secretariat and provides an update on the implementation of Decision 19.211 and 19.212. During the second Range States meeting of the joint CITES-CMS African Carnivore Initiative, the Range States agreed that the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, would update the roadmap and finalize it in consultation with the Range States. Furthermore, the Range States had agreed to focus on the development of regional conservation strategies for leopards using the roadmap as strategic guidance. The IUCN indicated that the roadmap could be updated with inputs from the forthcoming green status assessments, as well as inputs from the range states. The CMS Secretariat initiated the process to obtain inputs from range states through an online survey to inform this process. As the roadmap is not yet available, the Secretariat proposes that Decision 19.211 and 19.212 be renewed to provide an opportunity to the Animals Committee to review the roadmap for the conservation of the leopard in Africa during the next intersessional period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I think this is pretty straightforward. I open the floor for any comments from members. Not seeing any, I open the floor to comments from observer parties and observer organizations. Okay, so I would conclude that the Animals Committee agrees to submit the renewal of decisions 19.211 and 19.212 to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Okay, this is agreed. So with this, we can then move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 37 on Jaguars. I open the floor for the Secretary to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC33 Doc 37 was prepared by the Secretariat and provides the Animals Committee with information relating to the outcomes of the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee, including the request to the Secretariat to prepare terms of reference for the following: the creation of a modular system for monitoring illegal killing of jaguars, illegal trade in their parts and derivatives, and other aspects related to conservation, and the creation of an intergovernmental platform. Furthermore, SC77 requested the CITES and CMS secretariats to jointly develop, in close consultation with Jaguar range states and inviting contributions from the CBD and other relevant organizations, a joint working program. The Secretariat appreciates the support provided by Switzerland for the implementation of the aforementioned requests. The Secretariat drafted, in consultation with the Secretariat of CMS, terms of reference for the consultancy that is contained in the annex to the document. The Animals Committee is invited to take note of the Secretariat's progress in the implementation of SC77 recommendations on jaguars and provide comments and feedback on the draft terms of reference in the annex to the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for any comments from members. I see North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The North American region would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for preparing this document and the draft terms of reference for implementing the recommendations of the Standing Committee at its 77th meeting. We see added value in the situational analysis or diagnosis proposed by the Secretariat as first steps for the creation of a modular system for monitoring illegal killing and illegal trade in jaguars. Regarding the consultancy outputs for the creation of an intergovernmental platform and the option of a joint CITES-CMS Jaguar initiative, we are concerned about overlap between the joint CITES-CMS Jaguar initiative and the CITES-CMS joint working program as called for by SC77. Therefore, the North American region would like to suggest amendments to the draft terms of reference in annex of document AC37 as follows. On both sections, duty and responsibilities, paragraph 3 and 4, and under the ultimate result of service, delete including the option of a joint CITES-CMS Jaguar initiative. Also, on section on duties and responsibilities, number 2 says data quality. We would like to add and comparability. Number 2 under duties and responsibilities.
And what letter?
I don't have a letter here. I have 2. It was, it says data quality, and then in brackets it says the quality of data currently being collected by various players. Do you see that?
So it is on the 1B where we have data quality and then in brackets this terms.
Yeah. Sorry. That should be it then. So right after where it said data quality, I'm adding and comparability. And then for 4, I have develop a proposal of a draft CITES-CMS joint working program. Do you see that? Okay, and here we're adding in close consultation with the secretariats of both conventions, Jaguar range states, and other relevant experts and organizations as appropriate. And then it goes on to say that includes onward.
Can you read that out again,
Sure.
please?
So we add after joint working program, we add the text in close consultation with the secretariats of both conventions, comma, Jaguar range states, comma, and other relevant experts and organizations as appropriate, comma. End of the addition. Finally, the North American region would like to emphasize the need for complementary and coordination among Jaguar range states in the context of current and future work on Jaguars in CITES, ensuring that we are meeting CITES priorities while avoiding duplication of work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the last one was a general comment, right?
Yeah, a general comment, no
good,
change. No.
Good, very good. Did you capture that? Okay. I have Central, South America, and the Caribbean.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We are grateful to the Secretariat for preparing this document, AC 33.37 on Jaguar, Panthera, onca. We are also, in our region, grateful to CITES and the CMS for all the joint work carried out, both at the Jaguars meeting, which was in Cuiabá in 2023, and other work, and to congratulate Brazil for organizing that meeting. We support the actions that are put forward in this document, which were generated with the consensus of the region, and we consider that they will be of a great deal of help to conserve the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Central, South America, and the Caribbean. I open now the floor for comments from observer parties. I see Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil would like to support the intervention made by the representative of the Central, South America, and the Caribbean region. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the report and for the progress made in implementing the SC77 recommendations on Jaguars. As the chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Jaguars, Brazil is pleased to report that we have reached out to the members of the working group to request their input on the issues pertaining to the mandate of the group, with the ultimate goal to enhance the protection and conservation of the species. We look forward for their responses and active participation. We agree with and consider relevant the 7 areas of work to be included in the preparation of the Continental Action Plan, as presented in paragraph 6, items A to G, of the present document. Regarding the draft terms of reference, Brazil would like to support the proposal in the annex to document AC 33.37, which we believe reflects the conclusions of the meeting of Jaguar range states held in Cuiabá, Brazil, in September last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I now open the floor for Ecuador. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Ecuador would also like to align itself with what we heard from our regional representative and what we have heard from Brazil. As a party to CITES and CMS, we'd like to support the terms of reference as they are in the annex to the document. Thank you.
And I see Argentina. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I also would like to echo what was said by our regional representative, Brazil, Ecuador, and we'd like to repeat that it seems to us that this document should be approved without amendment, since we believe it reflects faithfully what has already been worked on at the workshop which was held in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I don't see any other party asking for the floor, so I open the floor to observer organizations. CMS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The CMS Secretariat would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for preparing this document, where we were involved in preparations of the terms of reference. We still consider that there are some we are considered there are still some issues in the document that require further clarification. We believe these cannot be resolved during this meeting as they need consideration by range states. We are therefore of the opinion that the consultancy proposed in the document would represent the most appropriate forum to clarify these remaining issues. Most importantly, against the backdrop of CMS Resolution 1414, which establishes a Jaguar initiative, and CMS decisions 14173 to 14178 on Jaguar conservation, we would like to stress the importance of ensuring that the work under CMS and CITES on Jaguar is not duplicative. The initiative established by CMS COP14 constitutes an intergovernmental platform under which parties to CITES and CMS, as well as relevant intergovernmental and non-governmental partners, can cooperate to conserve jaguars across its range. Hence, it should be clarified if the initiative can serve as the intergovernmental platform mentioned under paragraph 3 of the terms of reference. Also, parties of both conventions requested the development of a joint program of work on jaguar. It would therefore be important to understand whether the work program mentioned under bullet point 3 of the terms of reference is something additional to the joint program of work mentioned under bullet point 4 of the terms of reference of the same. These issues should be clarified by the Jaguar range states, and they go beyond what can be decided by this meeting. In order to do this, we have some drafting suggestions to the terms of reference. Firstly, under bullet point 1, which says undertake a situational analysis that includes, we suggest to insert an additional bullet point after bullet point D, so it would turn new bullet point E, and it could read, conduct online consultations with Jaguar range states and the CITES and CMS secretariats to agree, first, whether the working program is additional to the CITES-CMS joint program of work, or whether it constitutes the joint program of work. And second, whether the intergovernmental platform will have its own program of work, or whether the CITES-CMS joint program of work should be the program of work of the intergovernmental platform. Secondly, under bullet point 4, and here I recognize that our suggestion may make the sentence very long if also the North American suggestion is accepted. The bullet point 4 says develop a proposal of a draft CITES-CMS joint working program that includes the following, and we suggest to add after the joint working program, based on the recommendations of the CITES Standing Committee documents SC 77, document 43, and summary record SC 77 SR, as well as CMS Resolution 1414 and CMS Decisions 14173 till 14178. So I think the message is similar to what North American region suggested. Yeah, thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, CMS, for this, these comments and suggested amendments. I see Defenders of Wildlife, you have the floor.
A nombre de Defenders of Wildlife.
on behalf of Defenders of Wildlife, Humane Society International, AWI, Born Free, EIA UK, Fondation Franz Weber, Panthera, Pro-Wildlife SSN, WCS, and WWF. We support the statements made by the range states, and we congratulate the range states on their efforts to implement the listing of jaguar in Appendix-I. The organizations present have participated in the process, and we have seen that the countries have looked for collaboration on the implementation of in various international instruments, including CMS and the Jaguar 2030 plan, and have held regional workshops where they have made commitments for its implementation. We welcome the opportunity to comment on the terms of reference included in the annex of the document AC33 Doc 37, and we'd like to highlight the importance of concentrating efforts on demand reduction, and we'd also like to emphasize collaboration by consumer countries to combat illegal trade in parts and derivatives of jaguars. Thank you.
Thank you, Defenders of Wildlife, and finally, Conservation Force.
Thank you very much, Chair. And we commend the Secretariat, but especially the range states for having embarked themselves in such an important work to conserve one of the symbols of the region. However, we have concerns on these terms of reference that there is not enough work done on getting biological data surveys. I think that the state of the species is far, and the knowledge on the species is far from being satisfactory, so probably we need more survey. But especially, Chair, we are extremely concerned by the level of illegal killings of the species in the region, and especially by retaliatory killings by landowners and cattle owners, which most likely, together with habitat loss, are the main reason of the decline in the species. Having said that, Chair, probably we would like to see if the range states can consider adding some work on incentives to land owners, and especially to cattle owners, on how to conserve jaguar on their land. Having also recognized that none of the range states have any consumptive or sustainable use program of the species. And this could be part of the problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Central South America and the Caribbean. Conservation Force, I see Central South America and the Caribbean asking for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo some of the words that Conservation Force just mentioned in relation to Section 4C. It speaks about the necessary actions for preventing and combating illegal killings and illegal trade of jaguars, their parts and derivatives. I think that what he said is extremely important, because I don't know, I'm not aware if the range states have gathered enough information in terms of the distribution and abundance of jaguars within their jurisdictions. And I think that this is important because on a time series basis, there's need to observe trends so that a strategic management interventions could be put in place in those areas where it is necessary, because perhaps not in all areas the situations might be obvious. And so if the Animal Committee considers it appropriate, I would suggest that in that particular section 4C, we include something to the effect that an assessment is done by range states to gather information in terms of the distribution and abundance of the species within their respective jurisdictions. Thank you, Chair.
I see Europe, you have asked for the floor.
No, North America. Yes?
It's North America, yes.
I just wanted to note that the deletions that we proposed don't necessarily mean that we can't have a joint initiative, if that makes sense. The deletions just keep the discussion open to other options or ideas on the housing of this platform. And we wanted to then ask for, if that's not acceptable, the clarification of the joint initiative versus the joint program. Thank you.
Ecuador, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, sir. We simply want to stress what has already been said by range states. The document and its annex represent the results of our joint work, those of us in range states. I would also say that there's going to be a review of the Jaguar initiative in September at the 10th meeting of the CITES-CMS, and we would urge that the work continue on all this, so that we're going to be in a position to support the work being done on this resolution. And we are hoping that we can adopt this document without any amendments in view of the future work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador. I see Costa Rica.
Thank you. I would just like to add a little bit on the scientific and technical analysis being carried out in the region. We have a working group, and we had a workshop thanks to Brazil, and there's very intensive work done. There was work done on initiatives with farmers and others that work in Jaguar range states. This is scientific work that is underway. We've had publications. We've been doing all this for some time now, working on jaguars in the field. It's not yet done. We still need scientific work on this species. As a region, we are also working on another issue, that is an understanding of the negative interactions underway. Often, what is the cause of all this is the traffic in the species, and that is sometimes a consequence rather than a cause. And I do think it should be acknowledged that a great deal is being done in the region, and it is a good thing that the region has shown that it has doing lots of work in the initiatives underway. We also are continuing our year's worth of work on producing information on jaguars in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't really want to prolong that discussion because I have pretty good feeling of the room, especially in relation what the range states want, and I will reflect that in my conclusion. So if you really need to take the floor, please be short and concise, so that we can bring this topic to a close. I see North America, you have asked for the floor?
Yes, all I wanted to ask was, will it be possible for you to provide a summarization of CMS's intervention, because we did not catch the whole intervention, or have CMS repeat it?
You know, I don't think we need to wordsmith that here, because what we are doing is, we have heard from that this has been developed by the range states, and what we are doing here is gathering comments from the range states, from others, to guide that work further. It's not really about wordsmithing the whole document. So we were just gathering the information, the comments, the inputs, and based on that, the Secretariat will finalize those terms of reference. That's what we are doing. So we don't need to have a whole. We acknowledge the huge amount of work that's been done by the range states, and they have agreed on those terms of reference. So we should also acknowledge that. And in relation to CMS, we will certainly get those inputs in writing. So if you are able to condense what you said into a short intervention, I would give you the floor to do so that everyone can hear that, and then I will come to Mexico. So CMS, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Indeed, we were suggesting under bullet point 1 to add a text which would suggest that the further consultations also consider the different two elements. First, it's the work programs and whether they are not overlapping, or whether they are the same work program or two different work programs under the different initiatives, and then the same for the intergovernmental program. Intergovernmental platform, because there are platforms established by both initiatives, so to see whether it's the same, they will have the same program of work, or there will be two different programs of work of the two different platforms. So we were suggesting a text with respect to further consultations on these issues under the process. And then on paragraph 4, I think our suggestion was very similar to what North American region suggested, even though we were more specific in mentioning concrete documents and coming from CITES Standing Committee and from CMS, which should be considered when the proposal of the joint work program is developed. Thank you,
Thank you, CMS. And I'll give the floor to Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. We would like to join those who've thanked the Secretariat for hosting the workshop and the Secretariat for their contribution too. We were part of that workshop. Now, the one problem we have has to do exclusively with the difference between a joint initiative and a joint working program. Could someone tell us what the difference is between the joint initiative, CITES-CMS, and the joint platform? Now, we would simply like to fully understand it, and that has nothing at all to do with any work with CMS to make headway. We do think that there's complementarity here, and that's very important, and we also need to ensure that we join our efforts. It's also good that range states coordinate their efforts and share priorities. Now, we are not in CMS, as you know, and I think we should bear in mind what CITES priorities are, particularly with respect to this possible joint initiative and or work, depending on what the clear definitions are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. So I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat, maybe to explain the difference between these two terms, to make sure we all understand what is being talked about. So, Secretariat, can you have an explanation there?
Thank you, Chair. And I will attempt to explain using the African Carnivore Initiative as an example. So, for example, we have the Joint African Carnivore Initiative covering a number of species. So I would understand that an initiative like that could be something similar to the African Carnivore Initiative. And then the program of work is a specific program of work with activities and deliverables within a specific time frame to be achieved. Now, I know that for Jaguar, it's a bit more complex with a lot of existing activities or initiatives, and that is what I am hearing is that there's a call for additional consultations to ensure that there's no duplication of effort. But the idea is to have an initiative with a dedicated then program of work with specific timelines, etc., with activities to be delivered. So similar to what we're having for the African Carnivore Initiative. So I will leave it to the Chair to conclude, but what I understand is the need for consultation to ensure that all current initiatives are taken into consideration in developing future initiatives, and then to be very clear what will be contained in a program of work, taking into consideration the needs and the desires expressed by the range states. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. So I will try to wrap up now. Thank you. Okay. Looks a bit chaotic in front of me, but I will try to wrap everything together in in sentences. So the proposed conclusion is the Animals Committee notes the progress made in the implementation of the Standing Committee 77 recommendations on jaguars and invites the Secretariat to consider the comments made during plenary as it finalizes the terms of reference contained in the annex to document AC33 Doc 18, noting that jaguar range states expressed support for the terms of reference in the annex as they are, and emphasizing consultation to avoid duplication of work. Because, I mean, the Secretariat was going to do consultations anyway, but so now we have expressed that it needs to be done really, and we have also heard with whom and about what. Can the members agree on this proposed way forward? I see nodding, so this will be the conclusion on that matter. So I see the United States. You have asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As we did with a prior document we've discussed this morning, we would note that that not all of the Jaguar range states agreed with putting forward the terms of reference as they appear in the document unamended. Mexico and the United States are also both range states, and our North America regional intervention suggested some amendments. So perhaps it could be modified to most Jaguar range states approved. Thank you.
Thank you, United States, of course. You're right, North America is also range states, and they did not show unanimous support. So we will write most. Okay. So with this, I think we conclude that agenda item and move on to the next, which is conservation aspects of captive breeding of Asian big cats. And I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. This document was prepared by the Secretariat. At its 77th meeting, the Standing Committee requested the Secretariat, in consultation with the Animals Committee, to develop guidance to parties on how to evaluate the conservation aspects of tiger captive breeding facilities, subject to external funding. During the discussions, observer organizations suggested that the definition of the meaning of breeding for conservation purposes could be considered, and suggested that the guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation developed by the Species Survival Commission of the IUCN could form the basis of these considerations. The IUCN SCC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation outline 5 steps to evaluate the appropriateness of ex situ management as part of a comprehensive species conservation strategy. The Secretariat is of the view that these guidelines provide useful guidance that could assist parties in evaluating the conservation aspects of tiger captive breeding facilities. The Animals Committee is invited to consider whether the IUCN SCC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation provides the adequate guidance to the parties and on how to evaluate these conservation aspects, and consider the recommendation in paragraph 7 of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments from the members. I don't see any, so I open the floor to comments from observer parties. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports the Animals Committee agreeing that the IUCN SSC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation provide adequate guidance on how to evaluate the conservation aspects of tiger captive breeding facilities. An additional useful resource to highlight might be the IUCN guidelines for determining when and how ex situ management should be used in species conservation. It's a 2016 document. No matter the guidance, though, we would want to emphasize that there continue to be loopholes. For example, where education and awareness alone are sometimes considered sufficient to constitute conservation. However, at least the IUCN document includes a process for documenting and demonstrating the intended conservation benefit for the species in the wild, whatever that may be. We agree that for ex situ activities to be considered a conservation benefit, they must meaningfully be connected back to benefiting the survival of the species in the wild. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those comments and suggestions. Could you quickly read out that the guidance you were proposing as additional guidance that might be useful?
Sure, thank you, Chair. It's a 2016 document, and it's titled IUCN Guidelines for Determining When and How Ex Situ Management Should Be Used in Species Conservation. Thank you.
But with this, I open the floor to Europe. You have the floor.
I agree that the IUCN Species Survival Commission guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation provides an adequate guidance to parties on how to evaluate the conservation aspects of tiger captive breeding facilities, and their use also provides a uniform application of guidelines for ex situ management for all taxa, which is desirable. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. I have India.
Thank you, Chair. India notes the document AC 33 Doc 27 and the 5-step IUCN SSC guidance for evaluating the appropriateness of ex situ management as part of the comprehensive species conservation strategy detailed in the document. In India, all the big cat species found are listed in Schedule 1 of this and accords highest degree of protection. India has also established a central zoo authority as a statutory body as per the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, and has also formed a national zoo policy to provide proper direction and thrust to the management of zoos in the country. While the IUCN SSC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation could guide and assist parties in evaluating the conservation aspects of tiger captive breeding facilities, India wishes to emphasize that strict protocols needs to be evolved so that no pilferage occurs from captive facilities to the illegal markets. Thank you.
Thank you. India. I now open the floor for observer organizations. I see AZA.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of AZA, WAZA, IAZA, AFDPZ, ZAA Australasia, and San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. As noted in the document, we contributed to this effort by providing access to our guidance and resources related to conservation and care of Asian big cats. Given our expertise on captive breeding for conservation purposes, we were grateful for the opportunity to advance this work and look forward to future opportunities to contribute our expertise. We believe the IUCN SSC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation provide useful, consistent, and widely accepted guidance to the parties, while also noting that parties are welcome to build on this framework as they see fit to evaluate the conservation aspects of captive breeding facilities, including those for tigers and other Asian big cats. We also support the U.S. intervention regarding reference to additional relevant IUCN guidance. On a more personal note, Chair, as I won't be here tomorrow when your praises will be sung more fully, I wish to express my gratitude to you for all you have done and all you have given to this committee and to CITES more broadly. It has been my great pleasure to work with you over the past many years and to call you a colleague and a friend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see WCS, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. That's hard to follow. WCS is making this intervention on behalf of, and I'll do this quickly, but it's an important list: ADM Capital, AWI, Born Free Foundation, Center for Biological Diversity, EIA UK, 4PAWS, HSI, Panthera, SSN, Traffic, WWF, ZSL, and WCS, and we have submitted that to the Secretariat. We think the IUCN SSC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation provide a useful starting point for parties contemplating initiating programs for conservation breeding. However, they do not provide adequate information for parties to evaluate the conservation aspects, if any, of existing captive tiger breeding facilities within their jurisdiction. For tigers, we would define conservation breeding to mean, and we have submitted this, ex situ management of individuals that aims to minimize the degradation of behaviors, physical attributes, and genetic diversity of the species or subspecies over at least 100 years, which benefits the conservation of in situ populations by preparing for the introduction of acclimated viable individuals into the wild where they are extinct or at an unviable density or require genetic rescue, and where the preferred option of wild-to-wild translocations are not viable. Breeding should be managed and coordinated regionally or globally, not at the facility level through recognized associations. We draw the parties' attention to the roadmap to closing captive tiger facilities of concern prepared by a large group of conservation, welfare, and zoo organizations. Should parties require it, Appendix-III of that document provides further information on the characteristics of conservation breeding versus commercial breeding, specifically for tigers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCS. As I wasn't fast enough in writing down that other guidance, we have been Googling it, searching it in Google, and maybe if the US could once more read that text out so that I have it in complete.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe it was referenced, I think we found it in another document on the CITES website, but the document is the IUCN guidelines for determining when and how ex situ management should be used in species conservation. I'll find a link to it and provide it to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Okay, I see Asia has asked for the floor. Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just I want to remind that the guideline provided by the IUCN just is a general guideline how and why you set a ex situ program for any species, and you can't find any relevant information about the tigers or some specific species. It is just the first step levels that you want to decide if you want to set a ex situ program for one species or not. And I think we would need for more adequate guideline to evaluate the tiger activities, especially that in some places that we hear that the interest for the tiger breeding is increasing. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia. I see Asia has asked for the floor. Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just I want to remind that the guideline provided by the IUCN just is a general guideline how and why you set a ex situ program for any species, and you can't find any relevant information about the tigers or some specific species. It is just the first step levels that you want to decide if you want to set a ex situ program for one species or not. And I think we would need for more adequate guideline to evaluate the tiger activities, especially that in some places that we hear that the interest for the tiger breeding is increasing. Thank you.
I see China. China, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. China supports the guideline as submitted in this document and appreciates the suggestion by the US, but we cannot agree to adopt the additional guidelines without due consideration by parties. This is a matter of great concern, and China is not supportive of adopting measures too quickly. This document allows for input and discussion, and we must insist that the process be respected. Thank you, Chair.
So, having heard all the interventions, I would conclude that the Animals Committee agrees that the IUCN SSC guidelines on the use of ex situ management for species conservation provides guidance to parties on how to evaluate the conservation aspects of tiger captive breeding facility, noting the mention of additional guidelines in the discussion, and also noting that this information will be reflected in the summary record of this meeting. Okay? Because I don't think we can now on the floor add new guidance that has not really been reviewed by the committee, but we note that they are out there and they will be findable in the summary record of the meeting. Okay, I don't see anybody opposing, so that will be the conclusion on this agenda item. Now we come to document AC 33, Doc 26, implementation of paragraph 5J of Resolution Conf 1210 on registration of operations that breed Appendix-I animal species in captivity for commercial purposes, and I give the floor to the Secretary to introduce that document.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. The document responds to the request by the Standing Committee to speak on the standardized matters under paragraph 5J of Resolution Conf 1210 Rev Cop 15. And this calls for registration of operations that breed Appendix-I appendix species working for the conservation of the species. And the management authorities have considered appropriate and provided responses where they've described the activities and strategies used by breeding operations to contribute to conservation of wild populations. The Secretariat reviewed the response of the operations and has provided the responses. On the basis of the response to question 15, the Secretariat identified 7 conservation strategies: reduction of pressure on wild populations, contribution to genetic diversity of the captive bred population, potential reintroduction into the wild, contribution to research on the species, financial contribution to a conservation fund. The issue is particularly affected by work on the contributions, public awareness, and finally, contribution to capacity building. The overall analysis says that this is important in terms of the main conservation strategies. And finally, with the reintroduction to the wild, in particular for Crocodilidae family, the Secretariat notes that there is no means of establishing if this has been implemented or the impact on the conservation of wild populations, and there is no commitment or obligation to respond. The Secretariat also draws attention of the committee to the existing regulations that can help with this paragraph 15 in terms of the IUCN or Resolution 15.9. So we call on the Secretariat, on the Animals Committee, to tell us if they consider that the existing guidance is sufficient, and if they consider, if the committee should consider that extra information is needed, so additional guidance for activities on captive breeding or ranching to be provided to improve the situation. Additional guidance for individual species or families on the frequency with which the parental stock should be augmented to increase the genetic pool. And then 3, any other specific guidance related to the 7 strategies identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments from members. I see North America has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The North American region commends the work of the Secretariat in compiling information on registration of 406 operations currently included in the CITES register to support the development of guidance for the application of Resolution Conf 1210, paragraph 5J. The North American region considers that this work is a good starting point for discussion, but it does not fully address the task requested by the Standing Committee. However, we also note that the task requested was complex and required careful deliberation, consideration, and probably more information on the implementation of those conservation measures. As mentioned by the Secretariat, for this reason, we suggest providing information in document 26 to the Standing Committee for their consideration, including whether or not to request further actions through a decision at COP20, taking into account the Animals Committee's advice as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. Any other member wishing to take the floor? Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We do appreciate all the providing document that has been implemented, and we support that the current information is already enough, so we do not support the other additional supporting data will be needed. Thank you.
I open the floor to observer parties. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, we would like to express our sincere thanks to the Secretariat for preparing the document and for providing a review on the conservation measures that have been mentioned by parties with registered breeding operations to date. In our view, the summary is helpful to allow that same standards can be applied among parties, and we will believe that it will provide a good general orientation to parties for future registrations. That being said, in our view, the assessment on whether the operation will provide a meaningful contribution to the conservation needs of the species concerned is highly case-specific, should be proportionate, and depends on various factors such as the conservation status, existing conservation measures and gaps thereof, the species biology, number of specimens involved, or also the genetic pool, and so on. So we therefore assume it extremely challenging to prepare another additional guidance with standardized one-fits-all criteria that would apply to the different possible scenarios and that would allow the management authorities to make a conclusive evaluation, noting the already existing guidances, for example, on what could be considered an in situ conservation benefit. Besides, we learned that in 98% of the cases for registration, parties mentioned the decrease of pressure on the wild population as a conservation benefit, which we generally deem valid. However, this observation may raise the question, if there is a general consensus and a common practice that the breeding itself, in line with the other requirements of Resolution Conf 1210, RevCop 15, except for the meaningful contribution for conservation by reducing the pressure from wild population, is regarded genuinely beneficial to wild population, is this prerequisite for a registration actually needed? But this is just an observation which we like to share, and rather a legal question to be potentially considered by the Standing Committee. Based on the considerations stated before, we would support option A. As just mentioned, we would like to emphasize that the assessment whether the operation will make a meaningful contribution according to the conservation needs of the species is obviously based on scientific aspects. Thus, we are wondering why the Resolution 1210 does not specifically foresee the direct involvement of the respective scientific authority for making that finding. Therefore, we would like to propose that the Standing Committee may wish to consider whether it sees merit in making an addition to the resolution under paragraph 5G that foresees a direct involvement of the scientific authority in making a finding whether an operation provides a meaningful contribution to the species needs, which could specifically read: the management authority, in collaboration with the scientific authority, shall satisfy itself that the captive breeding operation will make a continuing meaningful contribution according to the conservation needs of the species concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Germany. Can you please read that out once more slowly so that I have the ability to catch this?
Yes, of course, I'm happy to do that. So the sentence would read, the management authority, and now comes the new insertion, in collaboration with the scientific authority, and then the rest remains how it was before, shall satisfy itself that the captive breeding operation will make a continuing meaningful contribution according to the conservation needs of the species concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other party wishing to take the floor? I see Spain. Spain, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As it's the first time Spain is speaking, we'd like to thank the government of Switzerland for hosting the Plants and Animals Committees, and we'd also like to thank the Secretariat for all the preparation and for this document as well. We welcome the proposal from Germany and the recommendation 33A. We don't think it's necessary to delegate to COP20 the preparation of additional work subject to external resources. And we're talking about a contribution to the genetic pool for captive populations and ensuring that there is genetic diversity kept, and considering the financial contributions to a fund, considering the needs of the ecosystem where the species inhabits. My apologies.
Sorry, Spain, can you take the floor again? That was a bit quick and the translation had problems following you, so can you please read out your statement again, because I didn't quite understand the end, so please go there again, but slowly, please.
We support the recommendation 33A because we do not think it's necessary to delegate to COP20 the preparation of additional guidance on the depending on availability of financing. We would also suggest that there's amendment to the drafting of the strategy contribution to the genetic diversity, adding safeguarding the adaptive potential and maintaining the genetic diversity in populations, and also that we amend the drafting of the strategy when it comes to the financial contribution to a conservation fund by adding the following: aimed at the conservation of the species that is bred or the natural ecosystem it inhabits. And we can also send this in by writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. Please do so. Send that statement to the Secretariat so that we can have a look at it. I see Europe, you have asked for the floor.
There is for sure merit to carefully analyze whether there is a need for captive bred specimens for reintroduction, or whether the often claimed requirement for increasing the genetic diversity of captive breeding stocks is accurate. But these questions might also be addressed on a case-by-case basis by the respective scientific and management authorities, and therefore I would recommend to choose option A with the addition or with the additional recommendation made by Germany in regard to this support or the inclusion of the scientific authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Europe, I see South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa would also like to align herself with the comments made by Germany with the proposed amendments as they are. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mexico.
Gracias, señor presidente. Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for this document, as we heard from the North American representative. But we see that of the 7 strategies identified by the Secretariat, some of them do not seem to be related to the conservation of the wild populations. For example, the contribution to the genetic diversity of the captive bred population, or some seem difficult to measure, such as that linked to the reduction of pressure on wild populations. We think discussion from a scientific perspective within the Animals Committee could be interesting, but we think the task was linked to proposing criteria and objectives to support the administrative authorities in determining if these strategies were suitable, that is to say, if they have been well described and if they are applicable to the species and their context, and even more important, if they are measurable and there are suitable indicators for that. Without that, it is difficult for the authorities to evaluate the strategies, both in the registration but then also following registration, so that they can be satisfied that there is a continuous and significant contribution to wild populations. There are some useful elements in paragraph 30. For example, where some general elements could be looked at. I understand Germany's point. There are many specific elements, and some could be joint. So when an administrative authority is evaluating a registration, they could see if the conservation measures include at least actions described which are going to be specific, how they're going to be implemented on the short, medium and long term, and how their impact can be measured. And that same basis can be used for the administrative authority to evaluate if it was met once the registration was completed. So I align myself with what we heard from the North America's representative said. There could be a lack of information, and we were commenting that it could be through a notification because the experience that is already there with those registers could be useful. There's information missing on how the registration is done, so maybe with a notification we would be able to have further information for the Standing Committee. Thank you.
And finally, UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretariat, for preparing this document. In our view, we need to take a pragmatic and proportionate approach to the requirements in paragraph 5J of Res Conf 1210, and would like to align ourselves with the comments made by our colleague from Germany. The CITES register of captive breeding operations is aimed at operations, as we know, that are breeding Appendix-I species for primarily commercial purposes. In other words, animals bred to obtain economic benefit, whether in cash or otherwise, and where the purpose is directed towards sale, exchange, or provision of a service or any other form of economic use or benefit. In these circumstances, any conservation benefits realistically are always likely to be ancillary to the primary objective of economic gain. However, of course, we agree that that's not to say that they can't make a contribution to the conservation of the species, but accept that they perhaps are unlikely to make such a direct or demonstrable conservation benefit. You know, as an operation that is set up that's primary focus is supporting conservation initiatives such as breeding for reintroduction programs, etc. Consequently, we are of the view that the conservation strategies identified in paragraph 9 and the existing guidance, general guidance in paragraphs 28 and 29 are sufficient to guide parties to implement the requirements stated in paragraph 5J of Res Conf 1210. We don't think further draft guidance is necessary for the species-specific reasons that Germany gave. And in terms of the Secretariat's document for Standing Committee 78, we support option A, but we could also support Germany's suggestion about proposing to the Standing Committee an amendment to paragraph 5G, ensuring that scientific authorities are involved in the determination around the contribution to conservation made by those operations. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I now open the floor for observer organizations. I see German Herpetological Society, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to thank also the Secretariat for preparing that document out of a very complex issue of this survey. We want to support the statements given by Germany, Europe, Spain and South Africa following up recommendation 33A, as this issue has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and I would also like to express our willingness to support respective projects related to that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, German Herpetological Society, SESSN.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. In general terms, we would like to express one very specific concern in relation to the conclusions that are arrived at in this document, in particular when it comes to the CITES-CMS family, because we have not seen any serious study on whether there is the breeders are truly contributing to reduce the pressure on wild populations for many years. this has almost been a point of dogma or pure logic, but very few times has there been an assessment. The few assessments that we're aware of indicate completely the contrary. So we would call on parties and all those that have breeding operations for Appendix-I, that they carry out serious studies that are well done to evaluate in relation to the wild populations if indeed these operations are contributing to reduce the pressure on endangered species. Thank you.
May I ask the interpreters if I can have 5 more minutes?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you.
I would open the floor for last intervention from BNA-EV.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, BNA thanks the Secretariat for providing the document. We agree that the assessment on what is deemed a conservation benefit is scientific and to amend Resolution 12.10, Ref COP 15, as proposed by Germany. Furthermore, we'd like to recall that if using the strict implementation of the definition commercial purposes might lead to a considerable bureaucratic effort regarding the registration of all relevant facilities globally, including private breeders. Both AC and SC should keep this in mind and also consider its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. So as a finally I have Brazil, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for taking the floor so late. But we wanted to share our concerns regarding the description of the conservation strategy indicated in Item 9E. We believe it's necessary to be cautious, to understand, and to be able to indeed identify the needs for establishing the criteria to be discussed. And in that sense, we would favor the recommendation on letter B. We believe there are benefits from additional guidelines, and we would like to have the opportunity to discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So let me try to wrap up. Okay, thank you for your patience. So the conclusion would be that the Animals Committee invites the Secretariat to note the comments made and the general support for the recommendations in paragraph 13.3a of the document. The Animals Committee further notes support for a draft amendment to paragraph 5J in Resolution Conf 12.10 Ref Cop 15 to include a passage on the collaboration with the scientific authority to be submitted to the Standing Committee. Does that make sense? Okay, I see nodding. So thank you very much. That concludes this agenda items and this morning's agenda. We would still have two agenda items to cover, so we will have to speed up a little bit in the afternoon, so be prepared for that. And so have a good lunch and see you in the afternoon. Thank you very much. Sorry? Thanks to the interpreters. And thanks to the interpreters for their indulgence. Thank you very much.